Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is sane and safe. I'm just going to say a few words at the beginning of this event. Welcome on behalf of De Montfort University. I hope you can all hear me. I hope you can all see me. Or maybe that's a bit of a mixed blessing. Welcome on behalf of Black History Season, and welcome on behalf of Leicester Centre for Creative Writing. As a senior member of Leicester Centre for Creative Writing, I just wanted to, as I say, just give a little bit of a frame for this event. It's about Black writers navigating the publishing world, and we have three authors with us this evening in conversation with Fahana Shaikh. Fahana Shaikh is our excellent industry partner on the long-running States of Independence event that the Writing Centre runs, which is an event that celebrates independent publishing. And one of the things that the centre has always been keen to establish is some kind of rapport with the local communities. And Fahana has very conscientiously set up a group called Rise Up on behalf of the Writing Centre that held events last year, trying to take the temperature of the community, trying to work out what kind of service Leicester Centre for Creative Writing can actually perform for local creative communities and writing communities. And when she had meetings about Rise Up and asked for feedback from the community, there was a very strong sense that what was needed at some level was an understanding of how to get into this kind of work, how to get into publishing, etc., etc. So Fahana this evening is going to chair a session talking very specifically about Black writers navigating the publishing world, and also trying to establish some kind of a sense of what the story in every sense is for each of the writers that we're going to be hearing from this evening. So without really any further ado, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Fahana Shaikh, who will take us through the proceedings.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Simon. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I am going to just start off by reminding us of the copy for the session. So today I'm going to be joined by Courttia Newland and Irenosen Okojie, alongside Leicester Centre for Creative Writing's our very own Anthony Joseph. We'll be discussing their writing life and the challenges of navigating the book industry as a writer of colour. We will be having questions towards the end of the session. The chat bar is open, so please drop your comments in there and I'll come to those around 6:45. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panel. So I've already mentioned Courttia Newland, Irenosen Okojie, and Anthony Joseph. I was trying to find an interesting fact that, and this was amazing. I found so many amazing things I could share in my introduction. But one of the things I found most fascinating, and I think it kind of brings us to this very interesting sense of what we've been learning today, what I've been learning and teaching, I should say, at the university around professional writers, is that you all work across forms and genre, from music to screen, short stories to novels, Anthony's wonderful experimental novel, and even stage. And between you, you've published an amazing 18 books, which I was just like, this, I think, is going to make for a really interesting discussion. However, and I know we've had such a turbulent year, but Irenosen, a huge congratulations on winning the 2020 Cain Prize for your for African writing, for that wonderful story, Grace Jones, which people can read online. Courttia, earlier this year in January, just before things started to go sour and our lives were turned upside down, it was announced that you'd secured a 2-book deal with Canongate, and your forthcoming novel, A River Called Time, is out in January 2021. But You've also been co-writing Small Acts for the Beeb alongside Steve McQueen. And Anthony, I know your experimental novel was published towards the end of last year. However, this year you've also, I don't know if I should say won or achieved or been recognised in the Paul Hamlin Foundation Composers Award. So I feel like a huge imposter tonight, sitting here chairing this. And what I'll do is maybe invite Irenosen to give us a flavour of your work, first of all.
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much, Fahana, for that lovely introduction. I'm really pleased to be here in this conversation with Courttia and Anthony, both writers I admire a lot. So yeah, it's really lovely to be here. I'm going to read an excerpt from my short story, Grace Jones. Yeah, it's a story about a Grace Jones impersonator navigating a past trauma in the present day. So here's an excerpt. There was a building that remained a husk, a blackened charcoal carcass gutted from the inside out. The carcass leaned against the heavens in protest at its losses, at its snatched internal sky, tainted with the fingerprints of one last daily procession, rituals of the living. And while the world slept, awoke, the cities hummed with chaos and order. Rivers began in cotton pockets, cupping slackened fists. The waters undulated into lost reflections. The gods got high off the colors from the seas. The equator adjusted itself only slightly. The stars twinkled in haphazard collusion. The mountains dappled by hammertan winds that became personal directions. The building remained, an artificial gut bathed in degrees of light, lodged in the stages of a day. The building was a hollow within a carcass, within a husk, within a world, within a galaxy. A series of crooked boxes varying in size, inside each other, where the gift was always the same, always attached to a bottom that had gone missing. On each floor of the husk, Sidra was running backwards to the late afternoon of a day. It had been flat packed into cardboard boxes sealed with sellotape. On floor one, Sidra peeled off the sellotape, the sound a split in the air whose line couldn't be traced. She removed items from the box. The late afternoon that day was made up of ingredients for cake: eggs, flour, butter, sugar, tin foil, a whisk, vanilla. On each floor, Sidra ran to the window where she stood in costumes made of tinfoil. On floor one, she was covered with eggs, screaming. On floor two, she was drenched in flour, howling. On floor three, she was soaked in butter, melting as a heat intensified while the husk whirred ominously on the periphery. And so on. Grace Jones's La Vie en Rose played on a radio that wasn't plugged in anywhere. Instead, the plug sprang from the bottom of the building like an untethered electrical root. The husk shook. On each floor, Sidra grabbed the whisk. Lost scenes fell out from the windows. Water was inadequate. Hoses throbbed with adrenaline and burned hearts. Death traps. The lifts became stuck all over again, spewing firemen's costumes like overgrown fabricated insects, like Genesis on speed. Everything escalated quickly. Ashes assembled into figures crawling on the skyline before colliding with traffic, which destroyed them all over again. The equator turned a fraction. The flames rose. The bottoms of the crooked boxes were set alight. Debris became glowing cinders that walked. A dot appeared on the galaxy. The draftsman held a flame he angled like a stick of lead, like a tool that could change guise at any point. Sidra had first seen Grace on TV. She must have been around 13 at the time. She'd been chasing Carla and Dorianne, who were playing with a set of screwdrivers behind the sofa, darting forwards and backwards in a mock game of fencing, shouting "on guard" sporadically, brandishing the screwdrivers like long, elegantly carved swords. The washing machine was spinning. The windows were open to hide evidence of her botched attempt at gumbo. The smoke alarm was broken. Half an hour earlier, it had beat incessantly. In her frustrated efforts to silence it, she's broken it with a broom. But none of that mattered because a woman who looked like her was on TV. Pulled to the screen by an instinct she didn't quite understand, she stared. It was on BBC One. She'd never seen a black woman so unapologetically dark on the screen. It was beautiful and she was hypnotized. Dressed in an all-black catsuit, the woman was tall, striking, otherworldly, confident. Her mouth painted fire engine red. Her head was in an off-yellow helmet shaped like a bee's nest. Sidra half expected a swarm of bees to hover over the woman's head, the queen bee in action. She felt as if they'd shared the same womb, separated by a few decades and a trail of bees' fats with mutual DNA and womb lining. Grace Jones, they said, Grace Jones. She repeated the words aloud, feeling them roll off her tongue while the washing machine spun, while Carla and Dorian swapped the screwdrivers for Power Ranger toys, starting wars in patois. The screen jumped, flickered, the picture vanished. Grace had been brought to her on a signal from Jupiter. She grabbed the hanger on the floor behind the TV, stretched its curved head, and inserted it into the television's aerial socket. The picture returned. Grace was gone, replaced by an item on an infected brand of milk. Her heart sank, but the image of Grace was burned into her head as if with an iron. She ran to her mother's room, opened her makeup drawers, searching through lipsticks, pouting her lips. She flung the wardrobe door open, its mirrors multiplying her automatically. She dived in. In the dark, she heard the flutter of a wing. A bee with a fire engine red mouth floated in a trail of static. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful reading. I am going to come to Courttia, who I'm relieved to say has returned to his seat. And ask you to give us a flavour of your work, and maybe just introduce what you were reading. What you're going to be reading from.
No, as Irenosen said, I'm really happy to be here with all of you guys, writers who I really respect, and I'm really looking forward to the talk later. I'm going to be reading from my novel, an extract from my novel, A River Called Time. There's so many ways to introduce and talk about this novel, but basically, in a nutshell, it's set in an alternative, parallel London where slavery and colonialism never happened. So because of that alternate history, African cosmology has become the dominant religion, particularly in London. And so that's the backdrop. There's all sorts of other stuff that kind of stem from that reality, that actuality, but that's basically the grand premise for the novel. And I'm going to read from about midway throughout the book. Because of this belief in African cosmology, our main character, Marcus, has found a way to travel to parallel times through out-of-body experiences. So by the time we get to this chapter in the book, this is an alternate version of him, but still within his same reality. So he's like a different character now, halfway through the book. And in this reality, he's kind of like what to call it, like a sage, a kind of prophet. He's a spiritual man. He offers spiritual guidance to the poor people in his zone. So I'm just going to read a little bit of that. As a younger, many years earlier, Marcus had fallen in love with photography. From that point onwards, all thought, waking or sleeping, concerned the need to commit every detail of his escaping moments to the tightly wound film in his camera, imprinting them forever on celluloid surfaces in a vain attempt at avoiding suspect recall. When he first discovered the form, way before Willow allowed him to use bottled chemicals to develop his photos, he owned an instant camera, delighting in the slow transition from darkness to color, blurred form to solidity, ghostly forms or environments into people and places he knew, flapping rigid photographic paper into the wind, poised for results. And so it was probably inevitable that his spiritual body, seesaw wavering between the earthly plane and the numerous others that existed on the astral ever since he'd woken, took on the form of those seeping, half-formed images he'd captured with an eager childhood grin, depressing the camera button with a finger, breath withheld, hoping the moment was right. Like those photos, the images invading his present were difficult to see. Unlike them, there was no development into anything even vaguely decipherable as reality. He couldn't tell if they were fragmented or belonged to some forgotten whole. In the last few days, the images had begun to strike with increasing regularity, and even while he knew why, Marcus worried about the lack of focus they gave him, especially now, when he needed to concentrate on his surroundings more than ever. Still they came, immersive as the immediate world, nebulous as nightmares, the shape of something that might have been a woman half veiled in shadows, swirling smoke, or thick cotton, a rotating form he struggled to make more apparent, and might have been the tires of a bike, although he'd never ridden one. A thud of noise, possibly footfall or heavy machinery, or falling concrete, or the distant boom of artillery. He didn't know, and couldn't tell, so they remained vague, eyes blind with cataract abstraction. It scared Marcus, though he couldn't allow himself to admit it. Meaning could be gleaned from those fragments, had it not been masked and coded beyond understanding. Practice adepts were wary of spontaneous projections, calling them jumpbacks. Post-ascension, they were prone to flashes of past, present, and future, particularly after a sustained or aborted jump. Moments of quiet meditation, recalibrations, alleviated most lasting effects, something Marcus had admitted after the panic caused by his last journey. Confusion led to his skirted normal procedure, behaving like an initiate rather than the experienced teacher he was. He knew what had happened, or rather, what he was doing to himself. He'd run from the task, neck deep in procrastination, walking to temple like a man who had nothing better on his mind to perform random errands for friends, avoiding his future self, fighting strangers, playing with the notion of murder, theirs or his, the possibility of ascending to become an ancestor. It was all diversionary, and as he left the temple doors a second time, emerging into low light fueled with renewed purpose, he chided his base self for being so easily swayed. He was a teacher, one who gave guidance, and yet he'd failed to counsel himself, much less notice the askew path of his journey. He'd allowed his body to detach from his mind, to become unfocused. He didn't hurry. Hands in pockets, eyes on the streets, ears attuned to war, even though his step was casual. He was dangerous in their zone, perhaps even more so after what he'd done to break up the fight. The people around him had an alertness he hadn't seen since the beginning, when he and Irenosen first declared themselves to the poor quarter. Back when they'd been men of routines and night, conflict of weapons, before he found spirituality. Violence at their fingertips, willing to do whatever felt applicable, men whose gaze was avoided by most. And now, the people acted as they had then, unsmiling, heads turned or viewing his back with cautious eyes, crossing the street before he reached them, whispering as he passed. Talk had been traded, new stories exchanged for old. They overlooked the teacher, recalling his past. Conversation died when he walked by their silent gardens, replaced with stiff nods, resuming when night folded and collapsed into the empty space he'd left behind. With his head raised and his step fluid, blue light made in an untethered shadow adrift through the quarter, a spectre of their enclosed space they could not avoid or escape, and so they silenced themselves in hope that he would continue without noting their existence.
I'm going to do that off mute. Thank you so much, George.
Sorry about my daughter, man. A bit loud.
No, I love it how that noise just came in as you said the word noise as well. I love it. It was almost as if you'd planned it. Yeah, so, yeah. Anthony, I'm going to come to you. Hi, how are you this evening?
Hello. I'm good. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. So I'm going to read a a bit of a chapter from Frequency of Magic, which was the novel that came out at the end of last year. This is a novel about it's about an author. It's about an author in a place like Trinidad, in a village, who is a butcher. But at night, he tries to write this novel. He's been writing a novel for 40 years, the same novel, and can't finish it. And subsequently, because he's been taking this long, the characters in the novel have gotten really tired of being in a novel for 40 years. So they decide to leave the novel. So they escape the novel and have their own lives and their own adventures. And his struggle, Raphael, who's the author, is to try to keep track of them, but he has no idea because he never reads back, so he doesn't know what's going on behind him. He just keeps going forward. So the novel is essentially about the process of trying to write this novel, and also the adventures of different characters in the book. So, but I mean, saying that, the excerpt that I'm going to read doesn't really have anything to do with that. It kind of just sticks out. It's one of the it's quite unique in the book in that it's very it's a kind of standalone thing. And what I think it is, since I mean, I didn't write the book, Raphael did. So I think what he's doing is just taking a break and trying to write something else. The Ark. Sun Ra was on the Ark. Prince Nico Mbaga, he was on the Ark. So was Art Taylor and Sonny Simmons and Bessie Smith and Super Blue, all on the Ark. And Joe Tex, Geraldine Connor and Giuseppe Logan, even Robert Aaron, the Roaring Lion and Aunt Bunny were abdominally on the Ark. The original De Fosto was also on the Ark. Beat rivers of song upon the Omole drum, just a cutlass carpenter, no skill with timber, four-eyed fish were on the Ark. Who play in war and frayed blood? Who play in mass and frayed powder? Who prevaricate and rouge throwing holy powder as ritual upon the Ark, but don't want ink or water to touch their clothes? Who else was on the Ark? Max Roach was on the Ark, and Ras Shorty Eye, and Eric Dolphy, and Amiri Baraka, and Ras Elibank, and Harry Belafonte. Them was high upon the boat. Babatunde, he was on the Ark. Olatunje, he was on the bow. Mama Drum. You say you're coming to come, but you never reach as far as the leader house. You never hear his sort of speaker drum boom dub roots all around the village. Bachelor life. And then you hear he courting 3 women in the congregation, and the shepherd raising crookstick and tapping his foot when the hymns swing. But is he suffering in silence, because he wondering if, while he in church, rocking back on his heels, his woman with leader Jim when night come, and he don't need to be a seer man to prophesy or to tack back and catch them in slackness. But his faith was firm. Every Sunday he in church, he was on the Ark in brogues. Beatty was on the Ark, Mung and Vino in pajamas, the wild moon, fever in his throat, performance poet and stand-up comic both were on the boat. And the Ark was full, but more was to come, and they come in still. Look, Ethel Waters was on the Ark, singing Creole Gold. Octavia Butler, hip good, up upon this boat. The mighty Sparrow, robed in African wax print and dancing as man. Even Eric Eustace Williams, dead and living same time, was also wrapped in kente. Larry Lee, masked and sudden drawling, played his guitar on the Ark. Fats Waller, Courtney Jones, and Winifred Atwell, even Gangang Sarah, blown from Guinea to Lokoto, Tobago, who had climbed the great silk cotton tree in Culloden with intention to fly back to Africa, but who fell to stony death because she had eaten salt. She was on the Ark. Then the mighty Spoiler, the mighty Terror, the mighty Broclax, the mighty Zandali in proper soft pants, throwing vitamins down his throat. Then Pharaoh Sanders reached with Yusuf Latif. Earl Lovelace laugh. He see Eric Roach reach on the Ark, his book of poems still warm under his arm. And when the Ark had 2 days to go before it reached Southampton, here come John LaRose and Charles Mingus. Here come Lord Kitchener in 1957 on his way back from New York. Here come Paul Robeson and Beryl McBurney. Even Olive Walk rode upon that boat. This was the year the great bandit graduated from bandit school and robbed 40,000 men in San Fernando. When the river washed down from the million hills and cleansed the city, and who were drowned, badly waterlogged, and who were dead, badly wounded. Then the bandit moved west, searching for that gold-throated woman, who after making disco love to him one morning, ventured him up to the hills overlooking the city behind the bridge and quarry, and show him where his own navel string buried. And he wonder how he never imagined his own city as a map, its grids and ley lines, the white spume foaming at the lips of the coast. Years hence, the bandit went knocking at discotheque doors, but the woman was gone. She was on the ark. Jack Blake was on the ark, and Dominique Gamour, as was Milton Cardona and Rosetta Tharpe, Odetta, CLR James, John Stubblefield and Yvette Cooper, Jimmy Bain, but not Kamau Braithwaite. He was not on the ark. Instead, Baba, the great teacher, had long since evaporated into air, into language, into sound, into the very sex fruit of poetry. Oil does not dry upon his tongue, nor honey on the tips of his fingers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading. And thank you all for your readings. I'm now going to open up to discussion. I do like readings, and I think it really sets the tone. I think we got a sense there, not only of how you're all playing with form and language. Anthony, I know your experimental novel, is this right that there was 100 chapters of 1,000 words each, which I was like, that's really interesting. Accurate, yeah. But I think what I got from the readings was this rhythm and movement. So one of the things I was really curious about is how can writers new to the craft actually develop their writing skills before they even get to a point of, trying to get a publisher. So maybe I'll come to you, Irenosen, first of all, and then Anthony or Courttia, just feel free to add in your own comments. Irenosen, you are on mute.
Am I on now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think first of all, you have to be a really voracious reader. From my perspective, you just have to read as widely as possible, read everything, like read outside your comfort zones. And that really, I think, fuels an appetite for language and stories. And then from that point, you start to play yourself. You start writing, I guess, slowly. It might be poetry. In my case, it was poetry, diary entries, little observations about people that they weren't really shaped into anything, but it was like the start of something. It was a real curiosity. So I think from that, and then you get into the art of doing that quite regularly, that means that you have a real connection to writing. My perspective, I have a real love and respect of craft. So, I was always writing in one way or another, whether it was like for magazines, whether it was like for a blog or just my own diary. I can't remember a time when I wasn't writing. So I think you have to read a lot, and you have to, it sounds really reductive, but I really think that is key. You have to read a lot, and you have to respect the craft. A lot of writers want to be at a particular stage really early on. And actually, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to like find your voice. So yeah, get to know what that voice is really. You can like attend workshops, like go to writer talks, but inevitably, I think you have to just kind of be daring and play around a lot, which is what I did. So it might be a bit cheeky to say this, but I didn't do a creative writing course. Like UEA, etc. It's really cheeky to say this while this is happening, but you have to figure out what you respond to as a writer. Like I think it's interesting. I think we're all subversive writers, myself, Courttia, and Anthony, and we're all playing around with language. And I really wanted that freedom. I didn't want to be taught a particular way to do it. I just wanted to discover it. So my route was to kind of do it like just by myself, but somebody else might respond from, say, I don't know, say somebody like Anthony or Courttia was your tutor. That would be awesome, right? Because that you're going to get, you know, a list of books that are going to be really interesting, and you're going to approach form in a different way. So it just depends, you know, on what route you want to take, but certainly like explore all the different options, you know, and find out what sort of writer you are, like what sort of stories you want to tell. And I think like I was so passionate about telling stories in particular about people of color, because I just felt like there just weren't enough out there. A lot of the work I was reading were like American fiction, and apart from a few guys in the UK, like, you know, Alex Wheatle, Courttia, Bernardine, there weren't that many. So I found that, you know, you had to kind of go between the two, and that really sort of like fueled my passion for writing. So I think those are the three things: like read a lot, you know, like be open to playing with stuff and being out of your comfort zone, and then like connect to any sort of development agencies that are out there, you know, organizations like Spread the Word, who do help people from the earlier stages to kind of develop their craft. And it's really exciting because you don't have to be an established author to connect with those agencies, you know, and they can like help you develop, and you can access loads of different opportunities that can sort of set you on your way. And just keep doing that. I think that's the main thing. Just keep connecting to those opportunities. But, you know, more importantly, like go out there, go to spoken word nights, go to literature events, like harass that writer that you really admire, like ask them for a cup of tea or something, and, you know, just find ways to be connected. I think that's the thing, and that's the thing I did. I was just like constantly looking for ways to be connected as well as doing the work, because I think that puts you in a different headspace, and it means that there's some movement, some momentum with the writing as well. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Courttia, did you have, I'm sure you've got things to add to that, and I know you love reading as well, so I'm so glad that Irenosen started on that note. Courttia, you are on mute.
So I don't know why I forgot as well. I don't have much to say on that no, or much to add to that. I mean, I just the only thing I would say is just to have fun with it, you know. I feel like a lot of people, it's like they really stress out about, you know, I need to be published, and, you know, I was like that a little bit. Yeah, I really wanted to be published, you know. But at the same time, I think you should just really have fun with it and just treat it organically and stuff, and immerse yourself, like Irenosen was saying, in the world of writing, the craft of writing, you know, the social events, you know, going to listen to people, be inspired by people, read, get into like just like the habit of writing in a sense, you know, because you build it up, you know. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I really, you know, procrastinate about it. You know, I put on my Twitter like literary procrastinate, and everyone's like, what, you don't seem like a procrastinator. Like, most of the time I don't really want to get out of bed to do it, you know, but once I'm there and I'm sitting there and stuff, I'm like, okay, we're going. I hit a flow, and then I'm into it, and it's because I've built up that habit and stuff. So I just think, like, for me, I want to love this thing. Like, I really love doing it, you know. I really love, you know, doing the reading said. I really love like actually just sitting down and writing and creating things. And it is like an addiction, almost like a way to just purge my soul in a sense. And I think for me, that's the main thing, as well as the reading and stuff, you know, which is, I think I can consider it all a part of it. You know, I get up, I read, you know, write a bit, you know, and it becomes just like this thing that's just this like fluidity, you know. We just move back and forth between these states and stuff of reading, writing, listening to people do readings and stuff, and just like immerse yourself in that stuff. So it all becomes second nature, and it's not just a thing of like, how do I get published? How do I get paid? You know, like just live the art, you know, and that's it.
Yeah, I wondered if you might say something about your own writing journey. You said there, you know, that you were keen to get published, but you did get published early on, but it's been a long road to maybe the 2-book deal that you now have with Canongate. Is there something to be said for persisting and, you know, like Irenosen was saying about getting closer to the truth of yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I think that's really a valid thing. And I know, Anthony, you know, you like we've both been on like a similar journey where that's that's concerned, but just like in different ways and stuff. And like, you know, I was really lucky, you know, to have, you know, big deal, big agency, you know, like straight off the bat, first book, you know, 23 years old, I was published, you know. So it's really weird to have all of that and then have like, I wouldn't say nothing, but have the opposite to that, you know what I mean? To be really, really in favor and then be out of favor is a really interesting journey to go on. And I was lucky. I had like two very, very good writing mentors at the start of my career who always said to me, listen, don't look at any of that stuff. That's not the important thing. The important thing is the work. And if you hold on to that, that will sustain you through this period. So I kind of like, also looking at, you know, we're talking about Black writing and Black art, also just looking at the careers and the lifelines of Black artists in the UK. And I'm looking at a lot of people and being like, wow, I saw the same thing happening to them as well. So I was always kind of like, weirdly enough, like waiting for this thing to happen, waiting for when, okay, this, I could be there for a while and I'm going to try and hold on for a long time, but it could be that I might fall out of favor or drop off, or, you know, I might not get the opportunities I was getting before. And how do I handle that stuff when it happens, basically? So I was always like stockpiling, you know what I mean? Like doing the readings and stuff and saying, okay, I have to concentrate on who I am as a writer. Because I was 23 as well, I was all over the place, you know, in terms of like, I didn't know who I was really as a person. So trying to find out who that was and stuff. And then by the time when things started to happen, where things weren't happening as much as they had been before, I kind of knew myself as a writer, and I actually felt quite confident and comfortable. So I could fall back on that. So I think it's really important. And like, I think someone like Anthony as well, I think I find you quite inspiring because you did that as well. You know what I mean? You were just like, okay, head down, I'm going to get on with stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm just going to not really watch that and just be the best writer I can be. And so like also having people like yourself there as well to say, okay, look, he's doing it. So I need to keep doing that as well. You know what I mean? It was really inspirational to me.
Fantastic. Anthony, you were mentioned a few times. I was trying to count. I think it was 3 times. Did you want to say something on that? But also, you know, I mentioned at the start in the introduction about the music. I didn't mention the poetry, but do you want to talk a little bit further about your own journey as a writer and, you know, keeping your head in the game, but also bringing your whole self to it?
Yeah. Well, that's a long story. I don't think we have time to go through all of that. But just to carry on from what Irenosen was saying about, just to touch on that briefly, and also Courttia, to bring those two ideas together for writers that are just starting off. I think it's important to read, but it's important to write, and it's important to develop a writing practice. You know, Courttia, you talk about not wanting to get out of bed. One of my things with students now that I teach is to say, promise yourself that you're going to get up every morning and write for half an hour. Yeah. You know, I'm of the old school. You know, if you can't do this, if you can't motivate yourself enough to get up and write for half an hour, 10 minutes, then, you know, rethink what you want to do, you know. Right. So I tell people to develop a discipline, a writing discipline. I think it's important. It's great to read and to be free to write what you want, but it's also very important to develop the stamina, because writing takes a lot of stamina, a lot of energy, you know, even physical energy. You know, writers are working, I work till 4 a.m, you know, it takes energy. So I would encourage people to develop the stamina and the only way you do that is by writing, getting to practice. Feel guilty if you don't write. When you get to that point, you're on your way. But I mean, my own journey, yeah, I was a do-it-yourself kind of guy. When I first started looking at writing as a career, this was back in the early 90s. And there was nothing like there is now. There was no Black publishing scene. There was no, you know, there was nothing. There was very, very little. And I decided I was just going to do it myself. I was just going to do it. And I started a small press, me and a couple of the writers, and we started working. We just started putting stuff out. And that was my journey. I kind of turned my back on the mainstream at that point. I didn't care. I wasn't desperate to be published by the mainstream. After a while, though, as the scene developed, then yeah, it became possible. And then, yeah, but I was lucky, like Courttia. I guess I was kind of headhunted by a publisher, you know. I'd put some stuff out there online or whatever, and a publisher called me up one day. That was actually Chris from Salt Publishing, called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, I want to publish you," you know, which never happens, you know. So that was my beginning. I mean, since then, you know, it's the rest is history. So I don't know if lucky, but I think he realized that I'd been working for a period of time and that I was at a point in my career where, you know, that was possible. In terms of the music connection, I'm a poet by nature, and I think all poets are musicians, you know, in a way. So music has always been at the forefront of what I do, even when I write prose. And actually, I started off trying to be a musician. That was what I thought I was going to do, you know. And then eventually, lyrics became more important than anything else. And I realized that I was a poet, and I shifted from music into poetry, and then found my way back in to music later on. It's an interesting journey. But yeah, I mean, you know, let someone else say something. It's a long story.
Thank you, Anthony. I think we've touched on maybe the challenges you faced or continue to face as a writer of colour. But one of the things, I think we will discuss this with this question, do you think enough is being done to address the lack of diversity in publishing? And maybe I'll come to you, Irenosen, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems to be on the agenda at the moment, right? It's been a big thing. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see lots of Black British writers getting like book deals. I think that's encouraging. The only thing is just, you know, we hope that it lasts, that it's not just for this time, because I remember the 90s too. You know, what I call the golden age of Black British publishing. You know, you'd walk into your local WH Smith and you'd see the Black section, right? And I was always going in there to that section to like reach for those books. And at that time, it was great to see that. I was like, whoa, we're really getting out there, man. And it was really inspiring. And then what happens is a lot of those writers, I think, are not properly supported. Like Courttia talked a bit about, you know, when you first come on the scene, and that's a great thing. But my issue is, you know, what happened to those writers who fell off? You know, why did they fall off? Those questions to me are interesting, because a lot of the time you find out that they weren't really supported enough. You know, like perhaps maybe the marketing wasn't put behind them, and you know, then that publisher turned around and said, well, you didn't sell enough books, and then that was it. You're literally screwed. You know, so it can happen, but it doesn't mean that just because it happens, like, you know, it's a long game, isn't it, writing? So I think we have to look at not only how we're being published and whether we're being published, but whether people are being supported and whether like that's consistent. So from my perspective, yeah, it's encouraging, but also like, are we being paid well? That's my other thing. Like, publishing paid me, hashtag publishing paid me. Oh my God, I nearly had a heart attack. I don't know if you guys followed that, but I was like, wow. I mean, I knew that we were getting paid less, but that was a slap in the face. I was so livid about that. I can't even, if I start talking about it, I'll just get really furious all over again. But yeah, the industry needs to be held accountable for that kind of stuff, you know, and I'm glad that it came up. I really am, because, you know, when it's out in the open, then people can be held accountable in a way, and pay Black writers and writers of color what they deserve, like what they're due, you know, what their white counterparts get paid, you know, because we work just as hard, and often it's a lot more challenging for us. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there before I start ranting.
Thank you. Courttia, do you want to add anything on that?
You really want me to start? I'm well known for starting. But look, what can I say? I mean, all right. My only thing is really just, yeah, I'm a little bit if I'm really, really honest, I'm a little bit annoyed that a guy had to die, or a few people had to die, for people's awareness to be raised that there was a problem. I'm not happy about that at all. Because a lot of people have been saying that there's been a problem for a long time. And so, including myself, but many more people than me, and for a longer time than me as well, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of, this is not to say that it's unwelcome that something is purported to be being done, but I'm cynical because, like, I was there, you know, I was in that 90s thing, you know what I mean? I saw it from the inside, you know what I mean? And I know exactly what was going on. I know exactly what was happening. I was discussing it with other people. I know how people were treated. I know how certain people were left out, you know? I'm very, very, I welcome it, but at the same time, you know, I think I've got a healthy cynicism towards how long it's going to last. And I always say, I think we need to work out a way of sustaining our own scene, you know, and we need to always go back to the art, you know, like I said, not the framework, you know. I think the art is the most important thing, and obviously the framework is important too, but if we can have a DIY approach to the things that we do, a lot more of the things that we do, we don't have to worry about like infrastructure being taken away from us, you know, publishing not paying us, you know, all those kind of things, you know. And I don't mean in the sense that you know, we have a radical approach to the mainstream, you know, in that sense where we say, all right, I'm not dealing with them. Like I said, I was picked up by the mainstream straight away. I was with a big you know, agency. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, but I mean, you know, better treatment is definitely key, but also us being able to be self-sustaining as well outside of that. And I feel like one of the things I could do which really helped me was to come out of the industry, in a sense, in that mainstream industry, and still be published by People Tree, you know what I mean? Still be published by Flambard, you know what I mean? There was a what do you call it? There was a net, there was a safety net underneath me, which was the indies. And I'm sorry, but the indies have been doing a lot of the, like, you know, the hard, you know, heavy lifting, you know, all the work and stuff that has made it possible for, you know, like mainstream publishers to say, okay, there's that person and that person, that person. I mean, even for yourself, Irenosen, you know what I mean? Like, you know, just like, yeah, there's been all sorts of like crazy stories in terms of like knocking at the door and not being accepted, and then the indies saying, all right, come. So yeah, I just think if we could build something that will be that safety net for us, not just in terms of like creating the books, but actually making what we do into a kind of art form that exists just on its own merits, you know, so we can say what we want to say and those kind of things. That is kind of what I'd like to see. And I always talk about grime and stuff, and, you know, like how, yeah, the youngers did it, you know what I mean? They went out there and just built their own scene, you know what I mean? And I think that, and we've done that consistently in music in this country and stuff, and in the Caribbean and stuff. But, you know, like bringing that ethos to literature would be really exciting for me.
Amazing, thank you, Courttia. Anthony, anything to add? But also just to say that I do have one other question, so if you could keep it brief, that would be great.
Yeah, well, what do you actually, where are we with the question? Because we seem to have, I don't know, remind me.
So one of the things I wanted to actually touch on, because I think it has come through with you, is that, you know, you said something about setting up your own small press. I know, Courttia, you've done loads of work developing other artists, Irenosen as well, just inspiring so many writers of colour, especially women, to, you know, keep going through maybe even informal mentoring. So this idea of like the challenges we face as writers of colour, and knowing that maybe these things or practices to overcome the lack of diversity come in cycles, and we're not always going to be in favour, or that window is not always going to be open. What can we do you think, to sustain or even rally together and create our own community so we're able to sustain a creative practice?
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far around this particular issue, but I think if we want to improve things, we got to get a few more Black editors on major publishers. You know, we got to get a few more Black editors. We got to, you know, we got to develop the publishing industry in such a way that there are more people that are understanding the work that we're trying to do, and that are marketing and supporting writers in the right way, writers that are writing, this work. Because I think that's the sustainability there. I think, right now, I mean, writing, publishing is a business like any other business. So it is there to exploit the situation and to make money from it. When that money dries up, or when the sort of economic viability of the thing goes, then it's going to be onto something else. I think so. I mean, sometimes when we're in it, we can't see it, and right now, yeah, things are quite exciting, and people are getting calls to do this and to do that. But what's going to happen a couple of years down the line? The only way that's going to sustain is if we have people in place who are supporting us at the higher level, which is in the major publishers. Academics as well. How many Black professors are teaching people? How many Black professors are under, at UEA, how many people are teaching this, and I think that's interesting as well, because I think more and more younger people, younger writers now are reaching out to education as a way, as a path towards publishing. A lot of people are thinking, okay, I'm going to do a creative writing degree, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be a published author. When I started, that wasn't really a thing. There weren't a lot of, I don't know if there were any sort of, creative writing degrees available. But now there's a lot more. So people are looking towards that path. So we have to make sure that that path is supported, and that you don't end up with a situation where no one understands your work, or you feel like you have to write in a particular way to be published. So I think that's what it is. But yeah. I think I agree with everything that Courttia and Irenosen said as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, thank you. And actually, I think we went full circle with that, because you brought in workforce diversity, and I know Irenosen mentioned that hashtag publishing paid me, and that infuriated me. But at the same time, or a week later, there was the spreadsheet from people who are actually working in publishing. Not only, it was like an informal way of tracking who's being paid what and which backgrounds they were from. And it was very stark to see that, this is primarily a very white, middle class profession. And even at editor stage, where they are making the decisions, we're not seeing enough editors of color. So I think that leads us quite nicely to the first question. I'm going to hold my last question maybe as a final roundup. So Siobhan Logan has asked, will the Black Writers Guild make a difference in holding the industry to account over a longer term? And while our panel are answering this, please do write in any more questions and we will come to them. So who wants to take that? And just to give a bit of context, this was set up a few months ago, was it? Led by, who wants to go? Because I'm not the expert on this. I'm thinking Kit Dual was probably one of the people involved. Do you think it's going to make a difference in holding the industry to account? Maybe you want to start, Anthony.
I don't think I do want to start. I don't know. Actually, I don't know is the right thing to say here. I hope it does. I do hope it does. But I think, I mean, for me personally, I mean, just a personal thing. I'm into unions, I'm unionized, but when it comes to sort of groupings of guilds and things, I'm usually the last person to get involved with that, and I don't know if that sounds terrible, but that's just the way it is with me. I wait and see, I'm going to wait and see how it develops and what happens, and if it sustains its energy beyond this year, then sure, if I'm sort of if I am allowed to be part of that and to be part of how it shapes the future, then yeah, great. But at the moment, I just don't know. I just don't know how sustainable it is, and I don't know how much because writing has always been for me a very solitary art. And I mean, not that we don't like to have a community, there's a community, but it's a really solitary practice. So the idea of a collective guild that is sort of building something and trying to influence publishing and try, you know, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure. I don't know if you guys have another, I don't know if Irenosen or Courttia has another experience with it, but I'm waiting to see. I'm not sure.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Courttia?
Yeah, I hope so. I feel like Anthony, I hope so. I don't know. I think any kind of change would be good. I mean, I said earlier, you know, I really think that we need to build in our own infrastructure, and whatever form that takes would be good. I'm actually less into the idea of appeals to the mainstream until I see a real shift, you know, and I haven't seen that shift yet. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be really, really great if, you know, we could walk into a publishing company and it looks like, you know, outside on the streets of London, because most of the publishers are based in London. So if the inside looked like the outside, then that would be brilliant. I'd welcome that with open arms and stuff. But like I said, part of my cynicism is the cynicism towards whether that's actually a real thing or whether it's just a response to everything that happened this year. So yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Thank you. Irenosen, did you have anything to add? Do you think the Black Writers Guild will make a difference? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Irenosen.
Yeah, not loads to add really to what these guys have said. What I will say is I think that they got to try, right? Like, this is it. We're always talking about what we should be doing and who should be doing what and why aren't certain things being set up? Well, now people are trying to set these things up. So it'd be interesting. I hope that it does make some sort of difference. And, you know, obviously it's interesting that at this time, like, we have to like capitalize on the moment, I guess, now that everybody's paying attention to like Black voices. I guess they probably feel like this is the time to really strike. So I don't hold that against them. I think it's nice that there's been some initiative. And if something like this was successful, I imagine what that would look like in the future for Black writers, in terms of having some sort of body there that could represent them and lobby for them and care about them, because at the moment we don't have anything. So my thing is, yeah, I'm hopeful, and you know, let's see what happens. Yeah.
Thank you. And then thank you, Irenosen. So just as I know we've got like a minute to go till we close. It's just been such a wonderful and thought-provoking discussion. So thank you to all my panelists. But I just wanted to finish on this one last question, and feel free to keep it brief. Advice. What advice do you wish you didn't listen to or had ignored, or you'd give to your younger self? Let's go with Anthony.
Can you rephrase that? Can you repeat the question? That's a difficult.
What advice would you wish? What advice do you wish you hadn't listened to, or that you would give your younger self?
Oh gosh, I think. Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I went through a phase where I was against any sort of labels, and I didn't want to be labeled a Black author. I didn't want to be labeled a this author or that author. But actually, being a Caribbean author and sort of identifying myself and calling myself that has been really helpful to me in my career, you know, in publishing career, but as an artist in general, because it means that I am part of a tradition. I feel very much part of a tradition, maybe not a community, but definitely a tradition. And I could draw on that whole history of writing, and I could put myself in it and hopefully inspire people in the future. I think that's been important to me. But there was a time when I was more of, oh, don't call yourself anything. Just be a writer. You're not a black writer. You're not a Caribbean writer. You're an author, you know. And I went through that for a while. But now I realize I'm a black Caribbean author. I'm a Caribbean author. And that has been helpful. I mean, I don't know how it's going to be in the next 5-10 years. I might change again. But for now, calling myself a Caribbean writer has been important for me. And, you know, I was actually reading an interview with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who in an interview says the same thing. He says a similar thing. He says, I'm a Caribbean author. You know, I identify as a Caribbean author. I guess if he can say that, hey, you know, I'm a Caribbean author, and that's been helpful to me. So, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm sorry, Siobhan has actually rightly pointed out that I've asked 2 questions that seem to be polar opposites. So I'm going to come to you, Courttia.
Yeah. I don't know if I can answer that question, to be honest. I had really, really good advice, and I generally listen to that advice, and it's generally worked for me. So I don't know if I can really answer that. There's nothing I think, and the advice that I didn't like, I didn't take. So,
so would you be willing to share what that advice was?
Stick to urban fiction.
Okay. Irenosen, I'm going to let you have the last word on this.
Yeah. Similarly, I think it was all right. I think I just kind of figured my way through stuff, and I worked in the literature scene as well, so I feel like I've had a really grassroots experience, you know, sort of cutting my teeth on the ground, like with poets, and, you know, working with a lot of Black poets on the scene, and yeah, being surrounded by really interesting people. But I don't think that there's anything that I would really do differently. I sort of ignored, again, similarly, like any advice that didn't really resonate, I just didn't pay attention to. And, you know, I think you also really have to have, not ego, but I mean, we're all writers, so we have ego, but a certain confidence, like in your voice, especially when people were telling you that there was no space for it, because I got told that a lot, and I just ignored all of that because I just didn't believe it. But what I did do was connect to people who I did feel like there was a sort of shared language with, and that sustained me. That helped me continue to feel like confident and like it was possible. So that is the thing that I would, I guess, advise people to do, is like, if people say there isn't a way, we'll find people who have made a way and like be inspired by them and just keep going forward. And that's it. That's all you can really do, you know, and you just hope that you land somewhere, and you've got to love it as well. I think that's the thing. Just keep loving it. When it gets to a point where you don't love it, you stop. You know, you stop, and then you rediscover that love for it again, and then, you know, you keep going, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. I just want to thank our lovely audience for joining us and for your contributions in the comments. Thank you for your questions, Siobhan. And can I just quickly say thank you to my panelists, and maybe we can just clap each other because there's no one else.
Thank you.
I'm really looking
Thank you,
forward
Fahana.
to your novel. I had fun. I hope you guys had fun too, and I learnt a load. I've taken loads of notes. So
that's good.
Can I just say hi, Courttia? Hi, Irenosen. It's been great being on this with you guys.
Yeah.
How you doing, Courttia? How you doing, Irenosen?
Similarly. How you doing, Anthony? Yeah.
Good. Good to see you guys. Keep safe.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone. What I might do, I mean, I don't know if we're still alive, so I don't know if Simon is going to. Oh no, we're not. Brilliant. Thanks, Jamie.